The Galactic Consortium had watched Earth for 3,000 years. They had seen humans discover fire. They had watched them build cities and destroy them. They had observed their wars, their art, their science, and through all of it they had waited. To the Consortium, humanity was not special. They were simply another species on a long list. A list of planets to be harvested. A list of civilizations to be controlled. Earth was number 7,847 on that list, and its time was coming soon. In the great council chambers of the Consortium, species from 1,000 planets made decisions about the fate of billions. They had done this for 10,000 years. They were efficient. They were organized. They were completely without mercy. Fleet Admiral sat in his command chair aboard the flagship of the Hegemony Fleet. He was old by his species' standards, with gray skin that had seen countless conquests. His eyes, dark and cold, looked at the notification on his screen with the same boredom he felt for everything these days. Another planet, another primitive species, another easy victory. The automated systems had flagged Earth the moment humans sent their first quantum broadcast into space. It was the year 2147 by Earth's calendar, and humanity had finally developed technology advanced enough to be noticed, advanced enough to be threatened. Read the report without interest. Population, 11 billion. Technology level, early space age. Military capability, insignificant. The invasion fleet would arrive in 6 standard cycles. The conquest would take perhaps 3 days. Then Earth would join the Consortium, its people working in mines and factories for masters they had never known existed. It was the way of things. It had always been the way of things. On Earth, in a laboratory beneath the streets of Seoul, Dr. Park stared at her computer screen with wide eyes. She had not slept in 36 hours. She had not eaten in 12. None of that mattered now. The signal on her screen was not random noise. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message, and she had spent the last day translating it. Was 34 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. She had dedicated her life to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. She had always believed that somewhere out there, other beings existed. She had dreamed of making first contact, of the moment when humanity would learn it was not alone. Now that moment had come, and it was nothing like her dreams. The message contained coordinates. It contained timelines. It contained population estimates broken down by age and physical capability. There were sections discussing processing efficiency and resistance suppression protocols. There were extinction procedures for populations deemed non-compliant. Earth had not received a greeting from the stars. Earth had received a death sentence. His hands shook as she saved the files. She needed to tell someone. She needed to warn everyone. But who would believe her? Who would listen to a single scientist claiming that aliens were coming to enslave humanity? She knew only one person who might take her seriously. General was 62 years old and had spent 40 years in the military. He had fought in 3 wars. He had seen things that would break most men. Nothing had broken him. He was commander of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Initiative, a position most considered ceremonial. After all, who was there to defend against? Now he sat in his office in the same Seoul complex, reading data with a face made of stone. "You're certain about this translation?" he asked. Nodded. "I've checked it 100 times. The mathematical base is different, but the meaning is clear. They're coming for us, General, and they've done this before, to thousands of other worlds." Scrolled through the files. Fleet compositions, weapon specifications, estimated casualties for various resistance scenarios. The aliens had not just planned an invasion. They had turned genocide into an administrative procedure. "How long do we have?" he asked. 18 months, replied, "maybe less. Their fleet is already assembling." Was quiet for a long moment. Outside his window, Seoul glittered in the night. 8 million people living their lives, completely unaware that those lives had an expiration date. Most men in his position would feel fear. Most men would feel despair. Felt neither of these things. He felt challenged. "Come with me," he said, standing up. "We need to speak with the Emergency Council." The United Nations Emergency Council met in a bunker deep beneath Geneva. 12 of the most powerful people on Earth sat around a long table and stood before them, explaining what she had found. Most of them did not believe her. "This is absurd," said the American representative. "Aliens, invasion fleets, this sounds like a movie plot." "The data is real," insisted. "I can show you the mathematical proofs. The signal came from outside our solar system. The information it contains is too detailed to be a hoax." "Even if it were true," said the Chinese representative, "what could we possibly do? You're describing a civilization that has conquered thousands of worlds. We've barely reached Mars." "So we should just accept death?" asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We should just wait for them to arrive and slaughter us." "We should be realistic," said the European representative. "Perhaps we could negotiate. Perhaps we could." "They don't negotiate," interrupted. "I've translated their records. Every species that tried to negotiate was destroyed anyway. The consortium doesn't want peace. They want resources. They want slaves. They want everything we have, and they will kill us to get it." The room fell silent. Stood up. "I'm not asking for permission to hope. I'm not asking you to believe we can win. I'm asking for the chance to fight. Give me 18 months. Give me every resource this planet can spare. Let me build something that might give us a chance." "A chance at what?" the Russian representative asked. "Survival, victory, what do you actually think you can accomplish?" Looked around the room. These were politicians, diplomats, people who had spent their lives talking instead of doing. They didn't understand what he understood. They had never faced an enemy that wanted them dead. "I don't know if we can win," he admitted. "But I know one thing for certain. If we do nothing, we die. If we fight, we might still die. But at least we'll die standing up. At least we'll show this consortium that humans are not sheep to be slaughtered. At least we'll make them remember us." The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. That night, in 1,000 secret facilities around the world, humanity began to prepare for war. Scientists who had spent their careers on theoretical physics were given unlimited budgets. Military officers who had trained for conflicts between nations were told to prepare for something far greater. Engineers who had dreamed of reaching the stars were asked to build weapons instead. And above it all, in his sole office, General looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was gathering. Somewhere out there, beings who saw humanity as nothing more than numbers on a list were making final preparations. They had no idea what was coming. Because humans were not like the other species the consortium had conquered. Humans did not surrender. Humans did not accept their fate. Humans, when pushed into a corner, became something dangerous. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The consortium had made their plans for Earth. They had their schedules and their protocols. They had done this 1,000 times before. But this time would be different. This time, they had chosen the wrong planet. The consortium expected acknowledgement. They always received acknowledgement. In 10,000 years of conquest, every single species had responded to first contact in the same way. Some begged for mercy. Some offered tribute. Some made grand speeches about peace and understanding. A few foolish ones declared war, their tiny fleets destroyed before they could even reach firing range. But all of them responded. Earth did not respond. For 14 months, Earth's quantum channels broadcast nothing but static. The consortium's analysts studied this silence with growing confusion. Their psychological models could not explain it. Their historical records showed nothing similar. "Perhaps their society has collapsed," suggested one analyst. The shock of learning about us often destroys primitive civilizations. Perhaps they are preparing a surrender message, offered another. They may be arguing about what to say. Fleet Admiral did not care about explanations. He cared about schedules. The invasion fleet was assembled. The conquest timeline was set. Whatever was happening on Earth, it would end the same way. It always ended the same way. Behind the silence, Earth was transforming. Dr. Han was the most brilliant quantum physicist on the planet. She was 41 years old, born in, educated at the finest universities in the world. She had won every award her field could offer. None of that had prepared her for this. "Show me again," General said. They stood in a laboratory buried half a kilometer beneath the Korean countryside. Around them, hundreds of scientists worked at computer terminals, studying the alien signal that had discovered. Pulled up a holographic display. Lines of alien code floated in the air, beautiful and terrifying. "Their communication network is vast," she explained. "It connects every world in the consortium, every fleet, every government building, every economic system." "And you can access it?" asked. "Better than that," smiled, and there was something fierce in her eyes. "They've never been challenged, General. They've never faced an enemy that could fight back at this level. Their entire network is built on trust, trust between species that surrendered thousands of years ago. There are no firewalls, no encryption, nothing." Stared at the floating code. "You're saying we can spy on them?" "I'm saying we can destroy them." Zoomed in on specific sections of the network. All their communication flows through relay stations. 17 of them spread across the galaxy. Take those out and the whole system collapses. Collapses how? Completely. Their fleets lose coordination. Their governments can't communicate. Their economy freezes. It would be like cutting the brain off from the body. Total paralysis. Was quiet for a long moment. This was bigger than he had imagined. This was not just defense. This was a chance to strike first, to hurt them before they could hurt Earth. "What do you need?" he asked. "Time," said, "and people, the people on the planet. I need to understand this network completely before we can take it apart." "You'll have both, anything else." Hesitated. "Hope, General, I need hope, because what we're planning should be impossible." Put his hand on her shoulder. "Impossible is what humans do best." On the dark side of the moon, Captain Minyu trained the first generation of Earth's combat pilots. He was 38 years old, a former naval aviator who had flown every aircraft his country had ever built. Now he was teaching young men and women to fly ships that barely existed. The lunar facility had been built in secret over 8 months. From the outside, it looked like a mining operation. Inside, it was a military academy unlike any that had existed before. Minyu stood before his students in a large hangar. Behind him sat a row of spacecraft. They were ugly things, angular, brutal, covered in weapons that looked bolted on as an afterthought. They had no elegance. They had no grace. They were built for one purpose only. "These ships," Minyu said, "are garbage." The students looked confused. They had been told these were humanity's most advanced weapons. "The consortium has been building spacecraft for 10,000 years, Minyu continued. "Their ships are works of art. They're fast, elegant, efficient. Ours are none of these things. Our ships are held together by desperate engineering and pure stubbornness." He walked along the row of spacecraft, running his hand along their rough surfaces. "But these ships have something the consortium ships don't have. They have human pilots, pilots who don't know what impossible means, pilots who don't know when to quit." He turned back to his students. "The enemy will laugh at our ships. They'll think we're fools for even trying to fight. That's fine. Let them laugh, right up until we kill them." A young woman raised her hand. Her name was, barely 22 years old. "Sir, how do we fight an enemy that has thousands of years of experience?" Minyu smiled. That experience is their weakness, not their strength. They've fought the same kind of wars for so long that they've forgotten what a real fight looks like. They've forgotten what it's like to face an enemy that isn't afraid. He walked to the nearest ship and climbed into the cockpit. The students followed, gathering around to watch. They'll expect us to form neat lines and fight by their rules. We won't. They'll expect us to retreat when we're outnumbered. We won't. They'll expect us to surrender when the battle seems lost. We won't. He powered up the ship's engines. The whole hangar began to vibrate. We're going to fight dirty. We're going to fight mean. We're going to do things that no civilized species would ever do. And when the consortium finally understands what they're dealing with, it will be too late. Back on Earth, Park worked in a different kind of laboratory. While studied the enemy's technology and Minyu trained pilots studied the enemy themselves. She had spent months analyzing consortium records, building psychological profiles of alien species she had never met. She had learned their history, their culture, their beliefs, and she had found something important. They're not evil, she told during one of their regular meetings. At least, not in the way we understand evil. They're just efficient. They see the universe as a resource to be managed. They've been doing this so long that they've forgotten other ways to exist. Does that make them less dangerous? Asked. No, it makes them more dangerous. An evil enemy might make mistakes because of anger or hatred. The consortium doesn't make mistakes. They follow protocols. They optimize outcomes. They've turned conquest into a science. Then how do we beat them? Leaned forward. By being unpredictable. Their entire system is built on the assumption that species behave in certain ways. Every model they have, every prediction they make is based on that assumption. If we do something they don't expect, their whole system breaks down. Like staying silent. Exactly. Right now they're confused. They don't know what to make of us. That confusion is our greatest weapon. Nodded slowly. The pieces were coming together, was mapping their weaknesses. Minyu was building a fighting force, was learning how they thought. And all across the planet, in secret facilities, humanity was preparing for the fight of its life. 14 months of silence, 14 months of preparation, 14 months of transformation. The consortium looked at Earth and saw nothing. They heard nothing. They assumed the silence meant defeat. They were wrong. On the final night before the operation began, gathered his key people in the Seoul Command Center. Was there, exhausted but determined. Minyu had flown down from the moon, his face hard with purpose. Stood by the window, looking at the stars that had once seemed so full of wonder. Tomorrow we change everything, said. Tomorrow we stop being victims and start being warriors. Tomorrow we show the consortium what humans are really capable of. He looked at each of them in turn. These were the people who would save Earth or die trying. These were the best humanity had to offer. They think they know us, he continued. They've watched us for thousands of years. They've studied us like animals in a zoo, but they've missed something important. They've missed the one thing that makes humans different from every other species they've conquered. What's that? Asked. Smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. We never give up. We never stop fighting. Even when the battle is lost, even when hope is gone, we keep going. It's not logical. It's not efficient. It's just who we are. Outside, the first light of dawn was touching the horizon. In a few hours, Operation Severance would begin. The silence was about to end. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks before the invasion fleet was scheduled to arrive at Earth, 17 human strike teams waited in the darkness of space. They were scattered across the galaxy, hidden near relay stations that had operated without interruption for thousands of years. Nobody knew they were there. Nobody could have imagined they would be there. Lieutenant floated in the cargo bay of her team's ship, checking her equipment for the 100th time. She was 30 years old, a special operations soldier who had spent a decade training for missions that had never seemed this important. Around her, 29 other operators did the same thing. They were the best Earth had to offer. Tonight, they would prove it. 5 minutes to insertion, the pilot's voice came through the speakers. Looked at her team. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans with gray in their hair. All of them had volunteered for a mission with a low probability of survival. All of them had families back home waiting for news that might never come. She had written letters to her parents before leaving. She had told them she was doing something important. She had told them she loved them. She had not told them goodbye. "Listen up," she said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "We've trained for this. We know the plan. We know the risks. In a few hours, either we succeed and humanity has a fighting chance, or we fail and nobody will ever know we tried." She paused, meeting the eyes of each team member. "I won't give you speeches about glory or honor. This isn't about that. This is about the 11 billion people back home who are counting on us. People who don't even know we exist. People who will never thank us because they'll never know what we did." The ship shuddered slightly as it maneuvered into position. Through the small windows could see the relay station. It was massive, a structure the size of a small city floating in the void. Lights blinked across its surface. Energy fields hummed around its core. It was beautiful in a cold, alien way. It was also about to be destroyed. "Insertion in 60 seconds, the pilot announced. Pulled on her helmet. The seal clicked into place, and suddenly she was breathing recycled air. Her suit systems came online, displaying data about her heart rate, oxygen levels, and ammunition counts. "Remember," she said through the team channel, "we move fast and quiet. Plant the devices. Get out. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. Our job is not to fight. Our job is to break their network." "What if we're discovered?" asked a young soldier named. "Then we fight long enough to finish the mission. The devices have timers. Once they're planted, even if we don't make it out, the station still goes down." The ship's rear hatch began to open. Stars appeared in the gap, cold and distant. The relay station loomed ahead, growing larger every second. "Go," shouted, and 30 humans launched themselves into space. They moved like shadows, using small thrusters to guide themselves toward the station's surface. Their suits had been designed to evade consortium sensors, another gift from its research team. To the station's automated systems, they looked like debris, space dust, nothing important. Landed on the station's hull with a soft clang that she felt rather than heard. Around her, other team members touched down in planned positions. So far, everything was going according to plan. "Team 2 status," she asked through her communicator. "In position, no detection." "Team 3. Same, ready to proceed." Moved across the hull, her magnetic boots keeping her attached to the metal surface. The station was even larger up close. It stretched in every direction, covered in structures and equipment that she couldn't identify. Alien technology, alien engineering, alien arrogance. They found the access hatch where intelligence had said it would be. His team had spent months studying stolen blueprints, identifying weak points and entry locations. The consortium had never imagined anyone would try to infiltrate their stations. Why would they? Who would be foolish enough to attack the masters of the galaxy? Humans would be that foolish. The hatch opened with surprising ease. Inside, a corridor stretched into darkness. Emergency lights glowed along the floor, casting everything in a dim red glow. The air was thin and cold. This section of the station was not meant for living beings. "Move," ordered. They advanced through corridors that seemed to go on forever. They passed machinery that hummed with power. They passed screens displaying data in alien languages. They passed sections where the gravity shifted suddenly, forcing them to adjust their movements. Twice, they encountered automated security drones. Both times, they destroyed them quickly and quietly, using weapons that made no sound in the vacuum. The drone's alerts never went out. The station's central systems never noticed. After what felt like hours, they reached the core. It was a chamber the size of a stadium, filled with equipment that pulsed with light. Energy flowed through cables as thick as trees. Screens displayed information from 1,000 worlds. This was the heart of the station, the point where all communications in this sector of the galaxy passed through. "Plant the devices," ordered. "Teams 2 and 3 cover positions." Her soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. They had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times in simulations. They knew exactly where to place each quantum disruptor. They knew exactly how long they had before the station's systems detected the foreign objects. Watched the countdown on her display. 15 minutes to plant all devices, 20 minutes to extraction. Then the timers would begin, and 6 hours later the station would tear itself apart. "Lieutenant," said suddenly, his voice tense. "Movement, Eastern Corridor." His heart jumped. "How many?" "3 security patrol. They're heading this way." This was the moment they had feared. The station was supposed to be automated, but intelligence had warned that occasional maintenance crews might be present, had hoped they would be lucky. "Intercept team, you have 3 targets. Quiet takedown." "Understood." Watched her display, tracking the movements of her soldiers. 3 green dots converged on 3 red dots. There was a brief moment of confusion on the readouts. Then the red dots disappeared. "Targets neutralized," the intercept team reported. "No alerts sent." "Keep moving," ordered. "We're running out of time." The final devices were planted with 2 minutes to spare. Each one personally, checking the connections and the timer settings. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. "All teams, extraction," she commanded. "Move to rally point." They left the same way they had come, moving faster now but still careful. The station remained quiet behind them. Its systems still hummed. Its lights still blinked. It had no idea that its death had already begun. The ship was waiting where they had left it. One by one, the team members returned, climbing aboard and sealing their suits. Was the last one in, refusing to leave until everyone was accounted for. "All teams aboard," she reported as the hatch closed. "Mission complete." The ship pulled away from the station, accelerating into the darkness. Behind them, the relay station continued to operate normally. In 6 hours, that would change. Across the galaxy, 16 other teams were completing similar missions. Some had faced more resistance than's team. Some had lost people. 2 teams had been discovered and forced to fight their way out. But all of them had succeeded. All of them had planted their devices. In the Sol Command Center, General received updates as each team reported in. He stood before a massive display showing the positions of all 17 stations. Green lights indicated successful missions. Yellow indicated teams still in progress. One by one, the lights turned green. "Station 17 confirmed," an officer announced. "All teams successful." Let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Around him, the command center erupted in quiet celebration. But he knew it wasn't over. The devices were planted. Now they had to wait. 6 hours later, the universe changed. It started at Station 1 and spread outward like a wave. The quantum disruptors activated simultaneously, sending cascades of corrupted data through the consortium's network. Systems that had operated perfectly suddenly went dark. Ships lost contact with their commanders. Governments lost contact with their fleets. Economic transactions that normally happened in milliseconds simply stopped. Fleet Admiral was in his command chair when the chaos began. One moment, his screens showed normal operations. The next moment, half of them went dark. "What's happening?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. We've lost contact with High Command. We've lost contact with half the fleet. Navigation systems are showing errors. Stared at the chaos around him. In 3,000 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The consortium's network was supposed to be unbreakable. It was supposed to be perfect. A final transmission came through, garbled and broken. It was from High Command, sent in the moments before their station went offline. All fleets, retreat, defensive positions, enemy action. Enemy action. What enemy? What species could possibly attack the consortium's network? Then the truth hit him like a physical blow. Earth, the silent planet, the primitive species that was supposed to be an easy conquest. They had done this. Impossible, absolutely impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. The network was down. The fleet was scattered. The invasion that should have been simple had suddenly become very, very complicated. In Seoul, watched the consortium's network collapse in real time. Stood beside him, her face lit by the glow of the displays. "It worked," she whispered. "It actually worked." "It worked," confirmed. "But this is just the beginning. They'll recover eventually. They'll adapt. We've bought ourselves time, but we haven't won yet." He turned to address the command center. "Send the signal to all defense forces. The enemy fleet is confused and scattered, but they'll still come. We need to be ready." Outside, the sun was rising over Seoul. A new day was beginning. A new chapter in human history. The consortium had planned to conquer Earth in silence, without resistance, without hope. Instead, humanity had struck first. They had cut the head off the snake before it could bite. And now, the real war was about to begin. The consortium's invasion fleet arrived at Earth's coordinates expecting an easy victory. 400 warships, the largest force assembled in living memory, dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found nothing but empty space. No planet, no defenders, nothing but automated defense platforms and a simple message broadcasting on all frequencies. "You should have left us alone." Fleet Admiral read the message 3 times, his hands gripping the arms of his command chair so hard that his knuckles turned white. Around him, his officers waited in nervous silence. They had never seen their admiral like this. They had never seen anyone like this. "Find them," ordered, his voice barely controlled. "Find that planet, find those primitives, and destroy them." But Earth was not where they expected it to be. During the months of preparation, humanity had deployed thousands of sensor jammers and holographic projectors throughout the solar system. The planet that should have been obvious to consortium sensors had simply disappeared. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we're detecting gravitational anomalies consistent with a planetary body, but we cannot pinpoint its location. Something is interfering with our instruments." "Impossible. Our sensors can detect objects light years away. How can they hide a planet?" "I don't know, sir, but they have." Slammed his fist against his chair. These humans were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to be easy. Instead, they had destroyed the communication network and hidden their own world. Nothing about this conquest was going according to plan. "All ships advance to the sensor anomaly zone. We'll find them the old-fashioned way." 400 ships moved forward in perfect formation. They were beautiful vessels, sleek, elegant, designed over thousands of years of refinement. Their weapons could destroy continents. Their shields could withstand nuclear explosions. They were the finest military technology the galaxy had ever produced. They flew directly into a minefield. The first explosions came without warning. A dozen ships disappeared in balls of fire before anyone understood what was happening. Antimatter warheads, guided by AI systems that adapted in real time, tore through the consortium's formation. "Evasive maneuvers," shouted. "All ships return fire." But return fire at what? The weapons were coming from everywhere and nowhere. They emerged from asteroids that shouldn't have existed. They launched from platforms hidden in the void. They appeared in places where no weapons could possibly be. The first wave of the invasion lost 40 ships in 12 minutes. From the bridge of Earth's flagship Defiance, Admiral watched the enemy formation scatter. She was 53 years old, a career naval officer who had spent her entire life preparing for an enemy she hoped would never come. Now that they were here, she felt oddly calm. "They're regrouping," her tactical officer reported. "No," replied, "they're panicking, there's a difference." She studied the enemy movements on her display. The consortium ships were experienced and well-trained, but they were fighting a kind of war they had never encountered. They expected neat formations and predictable tactics. They got chaos. "All squadrons begin Phase 2, ordered. Across the solar system, human ships emerged from hiding. They came from behind moons and asteroids. They rose from the surfaces of planets where they had buried themselves in rock and ice. They appeared as if from nowhere, surrounding the consortium fleet. Captain Minu led the first attack wing. His ship was ugly compared to the consortium vessels, angular, covered in weapons, held together by engineering that seemed impossible. But it flew like nothing the enemy had ever seen. "Follow me," he ordered his pilots. "Hit them fast, hit them hard, and don't stop moving." The human ships dove into the consortium formation like wolves among sheep. They moved erratically, unpredictably, refusing to follow any pattern the enemy computers could anticipate. They fired from impossible angles. They survived hits that should have destroyed them. They kept coming no matter how many fell. "What are they doing?" one of his officers demanded. "This isn't how you fight a space battle." "They don't know how to fight a space battle," realized. "They're making up their own rules." And those rules were working. The consortium ships were designed to fight enemies who behaved logically. They had shields that predicted attack angles based on mathematical models. They had weapons that targeted based on historical patterns. None of it worked against humans who seemed to have no patterns at all. Minu's wing lost 4 ships in the first assault. They destroyed 11. "Pull back and regroup," he ordered. "Second wave, you're up." Fresh squadrons replaced the first, maintaining constant pressure on the enemy. The consortium fleet tried to form defensive formations, but every formation was broken within minutes. They tried to concentrate fire on individual human ships, but the humans never stayed still long enough to be targeted. Hours passed. The battle raged across millions of kilometers of space. Ships exploded on both sides. Debris fields grew like deadly clouds. The darkness between worlds filled with fire and death. On the Defiance, Admiral directed the battle with cold precision. She had studied consortium tactics for months. She knew their strengths and their weaknesses. She knew how they would react to every situation. "They're preparing for a coordinated strike," her tactical officer warned. 100 ships forming up for a direct assault. "Good," said. "They're finally doing something predictable. All ships execute Maneuver 7. The human fleet suddenly broke apart, scattering in all directions. To the consortium commanders it looked like retreat. It looked like chaos. It looked like victory. They were wrong. As the consortium ships charged forward, pursuing what they thought was a fleeing enemy, they flew directly into the second minefield. This one was larger than the first. This one had been positioned specifically for this moment. The explosions were devastating. 30 ships vanished in seconds. The remaining 70 broke formation, turning to escape, and found themselves surrounded by human ships that had used the chaos to get behind them. "Fire everything," ordered. The trap closed. Missiles and energy weapons tore into the consortium ships from every direction. With no formation, no coordination, and no escape, the hunting force became the hunted. Admiral watched from a distance as a quarter of his remaining fleet was annihilated. His screens showed red alerts everywhere. His officers shouted reports of damage and destruction. His perfect invasion had become a disaster. "Admiral," his communications officer said, voice shaking, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship." "Put it through." A human face appeared on his screen. Admiral looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no mercy, and no hesitation. "You have a choice," she said. "Withdraw now and you can save what remains of your fleet. Continue fighting and we will destroy you completely." Stared at the human admiral. In 3,000 years of service, no enemy had ever dared to offer him terms. No enemy had ever been in a position to do so. "You can't win," he said. "Even if you defeat this fleet, others will come. The consortium controls 1,000 worlds. You are one planet. One planet that destroyed your network. One planet that ambushed your fleet. One planet that is offering you a chance to leave alive." Leaned forward. "We didn't ask for this war. We just refused to die. Can you say the same?" The transmission ended. Sat in silence, weighing his options. Pride demanded he continue the attack. Honor demanded he avenge his fallen ships. Logic demanded something very different. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hollow, "withdraw to jump coordinates. We are returning to consortium space." The consortium fleet retreated. 400 ships had arrived. 63 left. It was the first military defeat the hegemony had suffered in 3,000 years. On the Defiance, the bridge crew erupted in celebration. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had saved Earth. Admiral did not celebrate. She watched the enemy ships disappear into faster-than-light travel, and she felt only determination. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "We won one battle. The consortium controls 1,000 worlds. They'll be back with more ships, more weapons, more soldiers." "Then what do we do?" her tactical officer asked. Thought about all the intelligence they had gathered over the past months. She thought about the subjugated species throughout the galaxy. She thought about the thousands of worlds that lived under consortium rule, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Until now. "Send the signal," she ordered, "to every frequency we can reach, to every world in the galaxy." "What signal?" Turned to face her crew. A message, a simple message that might change everything. Across the crippled remains of the consortium network, a new transmission began broadcasting. It was in every language the humans had been able to learn. It was simple. It was direct. It was revolutionary. "To all subjugated species, Earth stands free. The consortium can be beaten. Join us." In the halls of power on 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under oppression heard those words. Most dismissed them as impossible. Some were afraid to hope. But a few began to plan. The Battle of Saul was over, but the war for the galaxy had just begun. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the consortium had something they had never experienced before. Fear. The consortium's collapse had created chaos throughout known space. Without their communication network, without their central authority, without their undefeated reputation, the old order was falling apart. Species that had been enslaved for thousands of years suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. And they remembered who had shown them it was possible. Ambassador Lee stood before the first session of the Free World's Assembly, a gathering of 37 species that had thrown off consortium rule in the months following Earth's rebellion. The meeting was held on a space station that had been built in neutral territory, far from any world that had chosen a side. Was 40 years old, young for such an important position. She had been a professor of international relations before the crisis. Now she was speaking for all of humanity to beings from across the galaxy. The chamber was vast, filled with creatures of every shape and size. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that could barely understand how they moved or communicated. All of them had one thing in common. They had fought for their freedom, and they had won. "Thank you for coming," began. her voice amplified through translation devices that converted her words into dozens of alien languages. I know that many of you have traveled great distances. I know that many of you have sacrificed much to be here. I want you to know that your sacrifices have not been forgotten. She paused, looking around the chamber. So many species, so many worlds, so many stories of oppression and liberation. We didn't seek this war, she continued. Humanity didn't ask to be harvested like animals. We didn't ask to be added to the consortium's list of conquered species. We simply refused to die quietly. And when we refused, we discovered something that the consortium had forgotten. The chamber was silent, every being listening intently. We discovered that courage is contagious. We discovered that one act of defiance can inspire 1,000 more. We discovered that the universe belongs to those brave enough to claim it. A murmur ran through the assembly. Representatives leaned toward each other, translating, discussing, hopping. The consortium told us that resistance was futile. They told us that surrender was the only option. They were wrong. They were wrong about us, and they were wrong about you. Every species in this chamber has proven that wrong. Back on Earth, the architects of humanity's survival had become legends. Dr. Han continued her research in the underground laboratory where she had first cracked the consortium's network. But now she was building instead of destroying. Her team was working on new communication technologies, new propulsion systems, new ways to connect the growing alliance of free worlds. We broke their network, she told a visitor one morning. Now we need to build our own, something better, something they can never control. Captain Minu had been promoted to admiral, but he still spent most of his time training pilots. The human fleet was growing, incorporating ships from allied species, developing new tactics for the wars that were still to come. The first generation fought because they had no choice, he told his students. You will fight because you believe in something. That makes you more dangerous than we ever were. Lieutenant had retired from special operations. She lived in a small house in the Korean countryside, surrounded by mountains and silence. She had done enough fighting for one lifetime. She had earned her peace. But she kept her combat knife sharp, just in case. Admiral was offered a seat on Earth's ruling council. She declined. She had never been interested in politics. She had been interested in exploration. Now she commanded the exploration vessel New Horizon, the first human ship designed purely for discovery rather than war. Her mission was to find other species, other worlds, other civilizations that might need help or might be willing to help. There are thousands of worlds out there, she explained to her crew. Some are still under consortium control, some are struggling for freedom, some don't even know freedom is possible yet. Our job is to find them. Our job is to tell them they're not alone. In the halls of the weakened consortium, Fleet Admiral had been stripped of his rank. He was the admiral who had lost to primitives. He was the symbol of the consortium's first defeat in 3,000 years. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. He spent his days in a small room, staring at recordings of the Battle of Saul. He watched the human ships dance through his formations. He watched his weapons fail against enemies who refused to stand still. He watched his perfect invasion become a perfect disaster. How did they do it? He asked himself over and over. How did they beat us? He never found an answer that satisfied him. The humans shouldn't have won. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the numbers. By every logical measure, they should have been conquered in days. But they hadn't been conquered. They had won, and now the galaxy was paying the price. At the Free Worlds Assembly was finishing her speech. The consortium believed they could control the galaxy forever. They believed that no species would ever challenge them. They believed that power was permanent and resistance was impossible. She raised her hand, and on the screens throughout the chamber, images appeared. Images of human soldiers fighting against impossible odds. Images of alien rebels rising up against their masters. Images of chains being broken on 100 worlds. They were wrong. Power is not permanent. Resistance is never impossible. And the galaxy does not belong to those who take it by force. It belongs to those who fight for freedom. The assembly erupted in applause. Beings who had been enemies stood together, united by a common cause. Species who had never imagined working with aliens were now planning a future together. It was not a perfect alliance. There were disagreements, conflicts, old hatreds that would take generations to heal. But it was a beginning. It was hope. General, now approaching 80, gave his final public address from the same Seoul facility where humanity had first heard alien voices. The world watched as he stood before a crowd of thousands, his white hair bright against the night sky. 18 months ago, he said, we received a message from the stars. It told us we were nothing. It told us we were scheduled for extinction. It told us our lives, our dreams, our entire civilization was just a number on a list. He paused, looking at the faces before him, young faces, old faces, faces that had known fear and found courage anyway. They planned to erase us. They had schedules and protocols and extinction timelines. They treated our existence as an administrative matter to be resolved, but they made one critical error. His voice grew stronger, carrying across the crowd. They assumed we would accept our fate. They assumed we would surrender. They assumed we were like every other species they had conquered. He smiled, and there was pride in that smile, pride in his species, pride in what they had accomplished, pride in what they would yet become. Humanity does not accept. We do not submit. We do not go quietly. When the universe tells us we cannot survive, we prove the universe wrong. When enemies tell us we cannot win, we show them they were mistaken. When fate tells us our story is over, we write a new chapter. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. And now the galaxy knows it. Now 37 worlds stand free because of what we did. Now tyrants who thought themselves invincible look over their shoulders and wonder if they're next. Now species who never dared to dream of freedom are planning their own rebellions. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there the consortium was regrouping. Somewhere out there new enemies were watching. Somewhere out there new challenges were waiting. Our fight is not over. It may never be over. But we have proven something important. We have proven that one planet, one species, one moment of courage can change everything. He turned back to the crowd, his voice rising. They wanted to harvest us. Instead, we became a revolution. They wanted to enslave us. Instead, we became a symbol. They wanted to erase us. Instead, we became something they will never forget. The transmission went out across the galaxy. On the new horizon, Admiral watched with her crew. On 37 liberated worlds, beings of every kind watched together. In the underground facilities where human scientists worked to build a better future, they paused their work to listen. "My time is almost finished," said, his voice softer now. "But yours is just beginning. Remember what we accomplished. Remember how we accomplished it. Remember that no enemy is too powerful, no odds are too great, no fate is too certain. Remember who you are." He raised his hand in salute, a gesture that had once been military but now meant something more. It meant humanity. It meant defiance. It meant hope. We are humans, and the galaxy will remember us. The broadcast ended. Across 100 worlds, billions of beings sat in silence. Then, slowly, they began to hope. They began to plan. They began to dream of a future that had seemed impossible just a year before. The consortium had made their plans for Earth. They had their schedules and their protocols. They had conquered 1,000 worlds before and expected to conquer 1,000 more. But they had made a mistake. They had underestimated a small blue planet and its stubborn, foolish, impossibly brave inhabitants. And now everything had changed. The galaxy's plans for Earth had ceased, because humans had cut off the line. And they were just getting started.